Hello.
Hello.
Well, if you come to this particular spot on the internet and clicked a button to listen to me and potentially others speak, you probably know that it's time for Some Always Strikes Last, a podcast where we teach you how to live, love, laugh, and occasionally play Warhammer well.
Yep.
Or so we would aspire to. Today
mostly laugh, but if we're being honest.
Yeah. Today we're joined with a very special guest that myself and Rocco get to talk to. It's Dylan Therriault. Yeah. Welcome, Dylan.
Yes, welcome.
No. I'm really excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. I mean, Dylan, I know from around the area. We see each other in tournaments, hang out a bit, in such fashions. Sure. But the internet and the community at large knows him as the king of the mountain right now, the top of the ITC. The guy who has the most points.
Yeah.
Looking down at other such luminaries as Gavin Greigar and everyone else, who might be up there, not even read off all the names. But let's just say that it's a cool thing. And figured we'd get him on to talk a bit about that, as well as an army that you may not have seen much of the table, but that he is an absolute boogeyman piloting against you, which would be the cities of Sigmar.
It has come, that's the ITC thing is weird, first of all. And then, but Cities of Sigmar, I definitely know how to explain that one out for sure.
Okay.
That's totally fair. And no need to go in any one direction with the ITC stuff, any cool, moments in passing, kind of what it's like, kind of remarks you have as we chat about it. Cool. But as you said, it's an odd thing.
It's what now? What was it?
It's an odd thing, to find yourself at the top of the heap. I mean, I know how you got there, winning a lot of games, but it's got to be a pretty interesting time.
I think I always tell people, when I think about it, because it's just, one, the scoring system for ITC is a little bizarre, right? It weights big events really, really heavily, right? So coming in 20th at a 200-person event is worth more than winning one that's 40 or 60 people. So already, it can feel a little bit just you got to add a few asterisks to top of ITC or even the point system at all. But I like to tell people that I go to everything and I win a lot. But when I'm surrounded by those names on that leaderboard, I know those people, the difference is that they go to a lot, but they win everything they go to, right? So it definitely has been I can understand why my numbers have gone up and up and up over time or stayed high just by virtue of the volume of events I go to. I just also know that there's these other players out there that if I were to play them, I would be hard pressed to come away with a win consistently against them.
Yep. Humble as well.
Very humble, though. I mean, I know you've definitely won a couple of the big events, if I recall, right? And what were some of the leaderboard ones this year that maybe contributed to that school?
One of the big ones. I think my most valuable event right now is still, I think that it's LVO from last year. They also, this is a weird year too, because it includes some of what occurred last year, right? And the numbers.
That's right. They extended it from around the November onwards time available. Was that right?
I think that they want, if I recall, Games Workshop changed they got control of ITC somehow, or
they merged.
So
that's right.
They work together now and wanted the calendar to begin and end at WCW.
Yes.
That's it. That's right. Yeah.
Right. It began and ended at LVO, which is at the end of January, where the World Championships of Warhammer are in November. So it just didn't line up. So this year specifically, I almost am padded out because I went to a lot of events over the winter and was very successful at them. And those carried over from last year into this year.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. So you had
take your wins where you get them.
Credit. Yeah.
Well, if I can remember what the ones that have been most valuable to me are. So, and for anybody who doesn't know, the way that ITC is ranked is a composite score of your best 6 events, right? So the more events you go to, the better chance you have 6 that are worth a lot more. And the points that you are awarded for each event is scaled or weighted based on how you place and how many rounds there are and how many players there were in that event. And then now there's an additional weighting depending on how related it is to GW, right? If I understand, if it has a golden ticket, it's worth more points. If it's a GW, it's worth even more points. So
okay, so a Tacoma opens all the points.
Opens, all of them to make sure you can just scramble for these things. I think LVO is worth a lot. I came in, I think 19th or 21st, somewhere in there, and that was worth 140, which is way more than even my first place at Sparkle Party in March was, which was
oh really?
10. Right, exactly, right. Like, so
Okay.
just to even show, like, I think the biggest thing for if you want to improve your ITC standing is like just show up to big events and do very well. You don't need to win them. Winning them is nice, actually. You should try to win them. But if you can't win them, do very well. That's all you have to do.
That's honestly really good advice for anyone trying to like kind of seek the top. I mean, you go to something like LVO or Atlantic City Open or, you know, one of the Tacoma or like, you know, Atlanta Opens or whatever. Like you're going to get a lot just by being there, right? Like what was it you said, like 210 for 19th? And like that's a lot.
For 19th, I think.
240.
210 for first, right? Like that's what's really intense about it. So
that's interesting.
Half the battle showing up.
It's it, yeah. And I think that's also been part of the success is just like having so much fun. That's very easy to go and play more games, and then you play more and more and more games over and over and over, and you just get better, and you just start to get more and more consistent because it's just the volume of it, right?
You tuned in, and that makes perfect sense. I remember you winning the Sparkle Party because I saw you'd flown out there, and that was where you had your face off with Mason, right?
I did, Mason had that was I knew Mason for a while because I have listened to the show a few times. And I know Mason has been a guest, and I knew Mason through. I've done some TTS tournaments like RTB that's released the Beast, which is like an online only.
Big fan of that here.
It's a good time.
Love Stewart.
It's a good time, and like I had known Mason because he was on some other teams that I had been against, and we had talked about their games because I knew that he had played a little bit of cities here and there too. So it was fun to like run into. He also came in second at Tacoma last summer, if I recall, and I listened to him immediately after to listen to like what his experience had been like because we had never like bumped into each other during that event. But I was really glad to meet Mason finally, and then also have a game with him too. Which was it was a great time.
That's awesome. He's a gem. I mean, it sounded like a lot of fun hearing you both tell it.
Very, very good. Yeah. Yeah, and I was glad because Mason's one of those players that like I know is extremely talented, and he was playing a list that like had a couple of really trouble spots for cities that I was worried about, but I just frankly like got the smallest opening to be able to try to go for like a big swing, and I took it, I lined the things up, and the dice went right, and it just worked out, and I was like, okay.
Was that a clearing Ushoran moment?
That was clearing Ushoran, right?
Yeah.
Briefly, like for cities, Ushoran's a big problem because all of your models are like all of your units are one wound models, so everybody's a one. Right? They get strike lasted, right? If they start combat with them. And because you're all one wound models, every point of damage you take when you're getting hit before you swing is lost output, right? Like you lose. You lose 6 to 8 hammerers or executioners, and like out the window goes like 40 damage potential.
Oh it melts away fast, right? Looks good on paper, but
you just can't like risk that kind of thing. And there was just the smallest angle in his castle to like sideways charge a purple sun and then pile into him to swing.
Nice.
I just have to try. Like otherwise, I wait here and die later. So that was good.
The most satisfying moment, just to avoid all of like the Macy strikes last, whatever that Crown of Delusion shenanigans stuff is. Just love to see it.
It was good. And Mason was sometimes there's a kind of way I like to play, which is I am pretty not loose is not the word, but I'm notoriously lenient about like the details of intentionality, right? Like I'll go back as long as there hasn't been. I think it's pretty clear when there hasn't been information that has like come up that would have changed a decision that you maybe forgot to do or a rule that you forgot to utilize. And I like always play with that with a level of forgiveness for my opponent that I don't like a forgiveness for that kind of error because I don't think it's that important to the game. Like that those things stayed intact.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Even if you forgot your tactic and we're 2 spells in, like let's pick you a tactic. That's just not really this game to feel for either of us either way.
Certain amount of grace in doing that, which I think speaks well of you because if it doesn't materially change it, in a huge crazy way, I mean, it prevents the gotcha game where like because my opponent like had to get a Red Bull because they were tired and they forgot to order operations because they're frazzled about something. Now I win.
And I just like I remember there was one thing on my list for a long time. I had like a model that was a sorceress who like if you had a combat phase ability that she could target enemy unit that she's in combat with on a 3-up, they get -1 to hit and wound until I think it's my next hero phase actually. So I almost never got this to trigger because I would when a remind them like, hey, you don't want to end within 3 of her. Like, do you want to fix this? Is there a reason you want to be that kind of thing?
You were like reminding them to not fall into your trap.
Yeah, essentially. These are not expressions of like our choices in the game. It's just like an air of no reason, really unforced. So it doesn't, those kind of to avoid, at least. Now, like on the flip side, I think that I've just discovered, but I think it's only fair to your opponent to also almost never ask for that level of forgiveness back to yourself, right? Like I think you should always offer it if it's there and it feels clear and your opponent has been fair over the course of the game. But it's almost not fair to ask somebody sometimes, like if you've made a large error in the middle of a game, to go back and like make like sort of, it's sort of an unfair onus on them to be forgiving, or like to let you sort of go back on something where they really don't feel comfortable with it. So
it's a fair point. You don't want to put pressure on that stuff, especially like in like a tournament setting. Like if it's like casual game, like beer and pretzels, the game shop, some practice, fine. The times where that can be okay are large, but the times where someone might feel like a little bit pressured to do it and then feel bad about what happens afterwards, those are also manifold. So I think there's always a bit of like try to learn all your rules and not be the person making the enforced errors that you want to take back, which is aspirational for all of us. And depending on the edition and the amount of games and reps, maybe more dialed in than not.
It's a complicated game, and it's there's been discussions about the fact that like there's a certain level of impossible precision that's assumed behind the rules, right? Like with like we can't actually move our models just outside 3 inches and things like this, such that getting super in the weeds about trying to meet the level of precision that's assumed behind the game is just like not possible and not really worth the energy of playing, right? Like whereas we can very easily say, put down our marker and say, I'm outside 3, this is what I mean. And then you have to have brief conversations with your opponent in order to delineate the game state, in order to make the game work at all. Otherwise, we need 6 hours to play.
Absolutely.
Oh God, yes.
I honestly love that.
Yeah, it's not even like, I'm not even saying that like, because we can't, we should try to be as, it's not that I think that we like, I don't think we have to accept that just saying like, humans will make errors and can't be that precise, but ideally we need to be that precise. I mean, more like it's not actually that important to be that exact about how you go about doing the micro of this game, as long as you're able to talk with your opponent and like enable that sort of collaboration that lets this actually work.
Well, there's definitely like kind of like a physical game hack to space and actual communication. Like if you're moving a bunch of models and you're saying my intention is to be 3 inches and 7 millimeters beyond this line, there's no confusion, and it stops these gotcha moments later because it's clear what you're trying to do. You're not in a computer game. You were physical models in a space that you get knocked or whatever. But like now you're moving. It's not like going to bog you down or create a feels bad.
It's sort of and it's so different. I think wargaming is so unique for this feature because when you think about other strategy games like chess, the game state is so clear because of the fact that there's just like a literal grid with the pieces can only be in so many positions. That you don't ever need to share a word with your opponent, right? But you actually almost, I mean, mind you, I've seen one silent game of Sigmar played, and it was kind of beautiful. But you don't actually need to. Well, you have to be able to talk with your opponent in order to make this game happen in the first place, right? Otherwise, it just doesn't.
As an aside, a silent game of Sigmar just makes me want to see that recreated, like in black and white, like austere, over exaggerated, like pre-talky, like movements.
No, it was round 4 of Masters last fall. It was on the Northeast team, and then we were playing against Texas. And it was Gavin Gregar versus Madigan Mason. It was Zine's play, and I finished my game early. I got walked over by trolls. Just like I took damage, like I had inhaled damage like I had never before on cities, and I just was dead. Bottom of 2 happens.
It does,
and then the Trug makes a difference. Anyways, but they're playing like on Jaws of Galay, Zinch versus Nighthaunt, and they just both know each other's armies well enough that they can kind of just point at their position, and they just know what the other person was trying to do optimally at any given time. And they just were not talking to each other, but like in a way that was just like perfectly in sync. It was genuinely very funny to walk by.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was
that's amazing. Well, we sort of hinted at it, but I think the people out there want to know. The folks who want to guide ragtag assemblies of men, elves, and dwarden to victory against the gribbly hordes of cannibals, which are pretty much everybody else. How do
Sure.
you do it? What's your approach in this edition with the with cities? Or some thoughts on that, or what I guess your mentality around it, maybe the list you run, whatever you want to talk about. It might be kind of cool for people to get your perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful army. Like it's just one of these. I was recently kind of looking for other armies to add to my roster, just because like it can feel a little weird to wake up to like a brief weird intermission period like this between PHBs and be like, oh well, I'll play something new, and then not really have anything like on hand that's battle ready because I've been playing cities so much. But essentially, like this is the army that I got started at tournaments with. And by convenience and also the book's complexity, I just like is the one that's always on the table to play, right? Like I have all the model, like this is the one that I have all the models painted. I don't have to add anything else to it. And there's always a way for this army to like change its build a little bit in order to, compensate for a new honor guard rule or something like that.
Okay.
Just always, the book is so deep that there's always a way to build something new. So it kind of feels like I'm playing brand new faction each time I go through it, but it's just not. It's always the same.
That's a fun thing. I mean, there is like all that variety, so you can kind of create this new variation, which contours to weird.
I would say the GW is probably getting close to finally getting rid of the pesky old world units out of the book, right? Like because they've had to compensate for having all these units from an older vision for this book than they have now, and they have been desperately trying to get me and my fellow marshals to leave behind the Hammerers and the Dark Riders and the Sorceresses and play the free guilds. And I think they just about have gotten there with that. But yeah, I've been playing cities since its new line was launched. So I guess that was the summer of 23, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. I think
23. And I think it was like a launch box and an Andrasta and 3 shield annihilators is what I had to start with, because I bought launch boxes, which was like 1,500 points. I needed 500 points of allies. And then I just sort of stuck with it and painted those damn Cavaliers, which took me like 6 months because of the complexity of the models and the details and things like that.
They're extremely detailed, yes.
As I'm getting started learning this game, it's like, this is the army that's in front of me. The other one that was on the table, my first army was Beasts of Chaos, which are... this will be their last week, I believe, which is always a shame to say. But also, I think Jack, when we met, I was playing Beasts at your first tournament at TJ's for Always Strikes Last.
That's right. That's right.
And our one game together was when I was playing Beasts of Chaos as well.
That was such a fun game, but also such a funny game. I think I've remarked on it before that it was literally my second game of 4th edition. I'm like, oh, fun.
Okay. I've heard this story from Jack's side.
I remembered like having to double in the middle of the game because Be'lakor had not used his Dark Master ability. Is that the one that he had not turned off one of my units yet. And I like removed 10 chosen. I was feeling very good after jumping off the board edge, but Be'lakor was standing there on like 3 wounds in combat and with the Dark Master up. And I kind of did not feel like I could give up the opportunity to just take the turn and hit him and
I remember that. Fly
away and then turn me off the next turn. But it ended up, it was the Vice, right? So the game ended up like 4 or 6 points, and I was like sitting there like, I can't miss a tactic or else I'm gonna like just not be able to outscore Jack. Like I can't get on top of it right now.
I think that was right. It was so razor close, and like there were a couple of moments that could have flipped or flopped. Yes, totally. I remember that you came in with your absurdly quick, Bestigor herd, which I just hadn't like experienced yet. I didn't respect it.
Right? Like
and like you hit all the chosen and the chaos chosen looking up at Be'lakor like, can we do the thing? Is your clever trap going to work? And I think I rolled like a 3, which was like a huge difference.
You actually got hit by a cockatrice who gave you strikes last, which was going for it. Yeah,
that's right. But remember, like it would have counteracted it so that you would have gotten a swing with 1, but not both.
1, but not both. Yeah, you would have lower. Yeah, exactly. Regardless, beasts are off the table for me, even though I have them painted, kind of and ready to go.
Yeah,
and it's going to be cities in the future. Yeah.
What's keeping you excited with cities right now? What are you looking forward to?
There's been a lot of changes. Like, so some of the Scourge of Garan updates have like specifically addressed weaknesses in armies that they have persistently had like over the course of the edition so far. Other armies got very little. I feel like when I look at Khorne, they seem pretty, like for instance, they seem almost identical to what they were. But when I look at cities, Zenestra specifically and some of the enhancements change the landscape of list building and options in ways that just like totally, completely make things work completely differently. I think the Bell in Skaven does the same thing, like just completely changes how the thing plays. The Nightbot Black Coaches are like new.
Oh my God, the two Black Coach is fantastic.
Oh man, they are deadly. So it's what is exciting is to finally be able to look at those cities, like the human models, and consider them like under these new circumstances, because my most recent lists are almost all free guild. It has not been the case for most of the edition. Most of the edition, we, like me and the other cities players who like have tried to optimize the book, have been really reliant on the specialized units from the dwarf line and the elf line and things like that, because the way that the universal like stat lines for this edition work, put humans just in such an incredible, difficult place in terms of output, right? Like every human unit hits and wounds on dwarves. And so you just,
and there's not enough volume to really justify it. And
it's not rend was the problem. Everything is scores rend 1, and it just was not.
Just doesn't light the world on fire with your Tucking Fusiliers or Cavaliers or whatever.
No, it did not. And especially at the end of 3rd edition, Cavaliers were base 3s, rend 1 off the charge and 2 on the charge and damage 2. And I just remember being able to move them like 40 inches and then kept anything they touched with just like absolute consistency.
That was great.
It was amazing. And then to take Cavaliers in this edition, granted they have 1 more wound than they used to, and run them into 5 wounds of 3-up save and watch them do 2 damage. My heart was broken. Like I didn't know what to do with that.
It's why it must have been
such a hard thing to resolve. Just that mental feeling of like, no, they do the other thing, especially because with all the ornamentation of that armor, they feel like a bunch of scary Game of Thrones knights who just you
feel the mountains riding down on you.
It's so the book for a long time the faction kind of actually revolved around using some of the humans for some of their utility, but then largely relying on elves and dwarves for field damage and movement, right? It's been an army that like at least every so time a battle scroll comes out, they've tried to shift it back towards free guilds. And the initial way to do that was to just make them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to the point of like comedy, where like Cavaliers are 150 points. So they're 15 wounds on a 3-up save, like with access to a 5-up ward all the time. And even at that budget, like you still just don't. Most GTs are not going to get away with just taking like 60 of them or like 30 of them or something like that. So anyways, it's been a book that has changed a lot over the course of this edition at this point because of the number of units that's in it. And then now it's looking to be almost, again, completely different. So it's just like self-reinvents. So it feels like I'm playing a new army again anyways, even though I've been playing just pretty much this one army for the course of this edition, right?
I kind of love that. And I can sympathize with that feeling, or maybe like kind of echo that feeling, that's a better word. Because every time they drop one of these war scrolls, it's like a totally new angle on whatever they got going on. And it's sort of refreshing. And add that to the stuff you have in cities anywhere, and the multidimensionality. I'm sure it's a bit of an overdrive version of it. But you got to play humans now. Do you feel like the humans have the gas with all these changes?
Oh, it's. I think I wonder how much I want to talk about. Jump into that now rather than like talk about what the army used to, or like some of the problems with the army.
We'll go with problems.
Maybe start with the problems.
We'll build up. We'll build up.
Sure.
Lay some groundwork.
I would foreshadow, right? I can tease it a little bit that I think that like the book maybe, or the index is like maybe the strongest spot it's ever been with the edition of Zenestra specifically, right? It fixes some of the problems that I was like trying to compensate for so long, which was difficult.
I know my Zenestra has been on the shelf for this index.
Oh yeah. 240 points just to roll a 1 on one of her prayers every time. It's like, I tried quite a few times to be like, maybe I'll run, I don't know, maybe I'll come up with some reason to have her, and it just never was.
I never thought I'd miss her ability to do mortal wounds in combat.
Oh, that was beautiful, wasn't
it? That was. I didn't realize how good we had it, man.
Lightning bolt. It was just everybody just taking B3 mortals everywhere. Gone.
Another one that just felt so overdriven the second she came out of that launch box.
Oh yeah,
shortly after that.
But now it turns out she was fine. Who knew?
Yeah.
Old Dinestra was much less of a problem than present Dinestra. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's crazy.
Yeah.
So good. Because she's a priest too now, isn't she? Is that what it is? Yeah, just looking at this war scroll. Oh,
No, totally not. She's not that lich, you know.
Definitely not.
It's an amazing set of abilities, and it's kind of
and fantastic model too.
Oh, she's very cool.
It's just so
very cool.
That model tells a hell of a story of whoever.
It's nice to have his castle center now too.
It does.
The Palatine and the corpse on the back and the two guys carrying around. Anyways.
Yeah.
The army has been, I would say, like for anybody not paying attention, Cities of Sigmar has been sort of a weird, like a very bizarre army for I think all of Age of Sigmar actually, right? Like people tell me that like in second
loved that second edition book.
Yeah, second and third edition, it was like you ran into a Cities of Sigmar player at an event and people would tell me they were like, and you kind of had to like stop and ask yourself who you were playing against because if like their list is going to on paper always look like it doesn't make any sense to you.
Yep, every time.
That may be true that they're just like somebody who played fantasy 15 years ago and just broke out their models and this is what they had. And then sometimes because there are 200 units in the book or whatever, right? Like somebody found something that was like not okay broken and they were just about to destroy you with something that you couldn't possibly have known about ahead of time.
Yeah. And that feels right. That feels right.
For me, that was my Living Cities Misfit Toys army because people are like, what the fuck is this?
Exactly. And then
you don't even know what fulminators can do.
I'm 7 inches away. Everybody's shooting. I'm charging. They shoot again. I shoot again when they retreat. Like it was just
There's all kinds of bullshit you could do. And every city was different. Every city pretty much was good at one point or another, except for maybe one or two.
Always a toolkit, right? Like even a list builder's dream and just a pile of tools that you could get access to.
And I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's largely been the same, and it's always been a story of like an army that took. People talk about high skill cap armies, right? Like Cities has a high skill cap and floor, I think too. Given that like there are ways that you're handed just an incredible set of options, but your baseline performance for all the units, especially in this index, is quite low, right? Like you need to sort of get very familiar with how to coordinate all the pieces in order to deliver like what is like quite scary on the table if you can get all of the dots to line up.
Yeah, it's that Rube Goldberg machine of can I get this convoluted plot to work? And when it works, it is glorious.
And what's kind of fun about it too is that this is a really consistent set of abilities, right? Like there's no free up for a specific like buff to go off that you really need. All of the order abilities, like to give orders to your units, they just happen, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you can navigate.
Destruction wishes they were.
That's right. As long as you can navigate the circumstance yourself and like navigate what your opponent is doing to you, like you can try to, there's always like a way for your army to be responsive to the way that you want it to do something to them. But
I love that about that. The clarity of the ability, the precision of the ability, like it's not always flashy, but you have 7 of them and they just work, the commands or whatever. Yeah. That's better than those dicey 3-ups or let me cast the spell I need. And
yes, exactly. And I think I have been sort of like, so I feel very lucky that I've been saved from people. People are really bothered by the fact that a lot of abilities for their armies are just on like 3-up rolls, and you'll get your stuff into position, and you'll go to do your dark trap on Bellicor, and you'll miss the roll, and the game will feel like it was over, and you've done nothing wrong. And I don't have that experience often because it doesn't fail. Right, like the abilities don't fail. Like maybe my planning could have failed, or like I put something in the wrong place, or I bit too much, that more than I could chew. But they're usually like it doesn't feel inflicted arbitrarily, right? If you can,
and that's everything right there, right? Absolutely. I mean, obviously, Darkfest is a funny joke, but it can be so many other things too. Like you could have like a redeploy, which is you can't control whatever, but like if your ability is like always strikes last and 2 up and you roll a 1, you still have to roll a dice. If it's any number of things like that, it can really ruin your day.
It's also it's like against other armies that I can think of that are like that too, like Slaves to Darkness or Iron Jaws, maybe, or KO. Even I would say like there's no parachutes on those armies. Like when it goes wrong, right? Like you lose that boat and that's game.
Oh yeah, all those brakes fall off.
Cities has never been for this edition like the kind of army that if it loses one piece, the whole thing falls apart. Like everything is interlocked in like moderate ways rather than like having any key piece. That might change here with Sinestro, but yeah, that's such a
we'll see.
model.
No glowing
like,
red target for the best.
Right. You can't, you could never like count yourself out of the game if you had like a really dispersed cities list because nothing was so important that you couldn't live without it. Right. So even when games are going sideways, if I pay attention and keep going, like you can scrape through and find a way to win that game too. Because
there's always a path to victory.
Always another option.
Question here, Dylan, too. Yeah. What are some of your favorite units currently in Cities of Sigmar that you really like, you know? I know not one unit is so important, but you're like, I'm not leaving home without X, Y, and Z.
I know exactly what they are. Right now, I'm not leaving home without Callus and Toll, the Command Corps, and Hammers, right? That's where I'm at. With if you were to ask me to play a game right now, and I were to bring those rules, that changes in a little bit, and that kind of list with the Hammers is like at its break point, essentially. When Field Sergeant goes away, it doesn't work. But those are the ones, those are my glue, right? There are a lot of different opinions on what the glue are. Like, there's a lot of viable units, but these are the ones I like.
So why Callus and Toll for those that aren't in the know?
Oh, why
Cities is an army of 12-inch bubbles that has almost no flying and no units that have enough wounds to consistently power through. So when you connect with your opponent, you will do damage to them, but you will not go to the other side of their army and start taking back points, right? You have no flexibility about, or like you have very little unstick, I guess you could call it. Like a ways to get out of that circumstance and start
playing an honest game of Warhammer. Your army rocks up. It even looks like an army with all the banners and shit. You crash in the middle.
Regimented forces clashing.
We clash, and then you suddenly discover that you're losing very, very slowly, but it's very, very slowly because your army stops having like really good efficiency after its first game. But how completely fix your problem because they are for 230 points, appear behind your opponent, remove their really important like wizard, and take objectives at the same time. And so now suddenly your opponent is faced with an impossible problem. Keep fighting their way through your like just disgustingly difficult army, like to wipe off the table, or turn around and go and kill these really obnoxious 2 units that both have a 5 board situation, right? And so Callus and Toll have been boogeymen for the whole edition, but they work really differently in cities. People take them in the other armies because they are really, really efficient on their durability. Right, because when you put on an objective, they have that like +1 to both save and +1 to the ward, so they just end up being killable. So for armies that don't want to engage early, like Lumineth or something, like doing something in the way, it was really powerful. But in cities, they don't have that bonus because that's from the Regiment of Renown. In cities, they come with an order, which is almost better in because one of cities' orders allows them to move their models 3 inches even after being set up or deep striked. So Callus and Toll deep strike 9 away, but that charge after they move 3 inches because they have an order for themselves is only 6 with their companion too. So it's really a very, very flexible ability to like get the order where you need it on the board, or like my favorite is because they're 2 units, they both drop in and next to each other. When you give the move order to a human unit, it bounces to another, and then they split and they take 2 points on the 6 objective mission out from your opponent, and that just felt very, very fun.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome gas off of the order right there. A couple 6-inch charges. Just gets.
Now, before the bodyguard change, right? Like you used to be able to charge just Callus and Toll in and leave the companions behind, and trigger bodyguard on the unit that you charged. This is before the rules were changed to do that because now Callus and Toll are in combat and the companions haven't charged, and because they're 2 models, one is sticking backwards to put them wholly within 6 inches of them. And that was just rude, right? Like that was just your friends. But you could just like grab not bow snakes, like fighting snakes from Doc and turn them to like 1 attack and be like, work your way through this 5 up board and 10 wounds. It'll take you 2 turns, so I'm safe. So it's been stuff like that. The Command Corps
delay.
The Command Corps is just ridiculous for its cost, frankly. They are.
But I lost my spy's ability to do the thing, man.
Did you? But they got the. They got
my healing.
The healing.
I know. I actually do miss the healing, but
I will say, having watched you use these a few times, it's a thing of beauty. But go on. I want the world to know.
Please.
There's a couple things that are like just on paper. Like there's 6 models with 3 wounds each, so it's 18 wounds.
It's a D&D party. It's the D&D
wonderful.
Party. Models are fucking great.
They look really cool on the table too, and
Oh, they do.
My command core that I've built now are my second command core is like using all the tokens from the other boxes and things. So it's like
Nice.
this goofy looking little like there's like a black powder squire in there as the banner carrier and things like that. So it's fun to get.
Nice.
But they're just like they're 18 wounds on a 4-up save. And then pretty much everything in cities has access to a 5-up board in the combat phase if they don't charge. So it's 18 wounds with a 5-up board. That is 160 points.
Yep.
And that's already like scratching your head going like, how is this possibly okay? Right.
Efficiency is just wild right there. Nothing else.
Even if we stop there, like this unit is really powerful. But on top of that, they have like a bizarre set of melee weapons that is hard for you and your opponent to handle because half of your models don't have anything important to do with the unit at all. So they're just like ablative wounds before you start losing output. And then one funny little guy in there has run 2 D6 crit mortal damage. And then there are 7 attacks that do damage D3 on like a support unit. So sometimes they'll just randomly do 9 to 13 damage to the target just by being there, right? Which is very bizarre. And on top of that, there are control 2 for each model. So if there are 5 of them, if there are 4 of them standing on a point and the banner's alive, they outclass a monster. So nobody's sniping. And married with the like auto take relic we have right now, which is called like the Brazier of Holy Flame. You can revive D3 models to the command core if they're not in combat at the end of a turn, which means
it's models, not wounds, which is fantastic.
Models, not wounds.
Yeah.
So 9 wounds will just stand up, just back play. And maybe they stood up on a point and now they're worth, 6 more control. And on top of that, they have the possibility of making opponents like very important command point cost 1 more. So like at bottom of battle round, your opponent's trying to get out of combat with like a cavalry unit to charge you again on the double, and you can just like spike them and say that'll cost you 2 command points, and they don't have another one because it's the end of the battle round. They probably spent them all, and then they're sitting duck, or they maybe even miss their tactic for that, right? So this is just like this unit that just completely warps the game. It's like a really durable screen that's really hard to get through. If you don't kill it, it walks away and half of it stands back up. It might really hurt you if it gets left in combat. And then I think finally my favorite actual part of this unit is that it's one of the only units in the book that has a standing ward. Like everything in cities can get a ward save in the combat phase, provided they do not charge. So cities players, if you're up against one, your opponent is most vulnerable when they're charging you because their units won't have access to their defensive durability. So if you can find a way to deal damage on their turn, that's when you're going to get real hurt into them. The command core, if you have brought a marshal with them, can get a ward save while also tackling enemy units, right? So if you can have, like your executioners or another unit that doesn't have a ward can swing first somewhere else, and your command core is very safe to be able to get hit first because half of the unit doesn't really matter for damage, and you don't really even care for because it's a tackle, like you don't really need them all to live because you can take a ward save, a few models can be alive, and your opponent's turn they won't be able to move because there's a command core in your face, right? So they're just sticky problem. Because they charge in, the marshal walks up behind them. He stays within 3 of some guy's tail who didn't charge all the way in, and it just becomes like a weird immovable wall. I can imagine like a lot of circumstances where, like if you especially would charge with 2 of them and they both have the ward, like into trolls or something, there's just no good math problem for them to get out of that circumstance because you have to like split attacks perfectly and nothing has to go wrong. And like I'm just standing there with 30 control on the point, like. Sorry, but we're both stuck here for the next 2 hours. Like we're not going anywhere with these units.
I love the math on that and the functionality of it. I still think it's so funny to imagine like the command core saying, "You guys stay back, hordes of halberdiers. We got this."
It looks so dumb because it's the officers that are standing like 9 inches out front of my army, and like the hammers, like the most heavily armored troops, like elite border troops, are standing behind, like waiting, like safely. It's just. It makes no sense, but it's just like it solves.
It works.
Useful unit to just leverage against people, right? So
that's
you use
really
it
fun.
Green, right? Like you just push it out. It's in the way, and like if they die, it's unfortunate, but they probably weren't going to. And if they don't, they slide into weird places. They pin units for a long time. D3 of them come back, and they do all this utility that you just like never.
Yeah.
It's just really valuable to have them around. I think
lead from the front, man.
I may have 3 of them in my lists right now. It's just
3 of them.
Can't even fault it.
That's
such
crazy. All right. I believe you. Don't get me wrong. That's
to hold the crown, right? Like I do what I must here.
That's true. That's true.
The officers academy list, like someone broke into the wrong barracks.
We're getting to the bottom of the barrel. Like they're all
That's too,
children at this
love
point
it.
that I'm recruiting. All right,
It's
what's
so
the
funny.
mine? This is, and then like there's this is I think not controversial, but like there's other ways to play this army. But
yes.
for my damage, I really like the burst on the hammers.
Okay.
So for context, like one of the problems, what we talked about it a little bit, is like cities, armies don't have a lot of things that hit and wound really consistently, right? So like either something hits on 4s or it wounds on 4s, sometimes both. And those are both really difficult sticking points to get over. And a lot of it only has rend 1, and there's very outside executioners, there's very limited access to crit mortals, right? So you have this kind of like damage problem, especially in the human side. But I found hammers could be the answer to that, which is, it's sort of unusual on the table because sort of a piece that looks like an anvil will be lurking to be the counterpunch instead of up front. And it's because just their profile is so, there's just like so much mass violence in their profile, like their attack profile, that if you can coordinate to charge, the unit becomes 3 attacks each that are damaged to all, like each, right? Which is just, so a unit of 20 of them is 60 attacks. And then the profile can vary from like rend 1 to 3 based on a special assignment or a prayer that goes off. And there's just a certain point where like there is almost nothing in the game that lives being charged by 20 hammers at rend 2 or 3, right? I think we said there was a moment during LVO's final game where Jeremy Lefaire's 20 hammers charge into I think a full block of 10 Blight Kings, like completely healthy in the middle of the board, and sort of chat is just like, why is he doing this? They're not going to kill them. They're just going to die very quickly over time. They're outside their save, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly Jeremy's like, okay, that'll be 31 saves at rend 3. And he didn't even, he had canceled the Allah defend, right? So they saving on 6s and they took like 45 damage or 50 before the ward, and then were completely wiped from 100, like full health down in one go. And that, I think,
makes sense.
It's just, it makes sense mathematically, but you don't see it coming until like these 25 millimeter bases just lift your entire army if they get the opportunity to, right?
Yeah.
I love that as a theme. Sometimes a little 25 millimeter like super soldier comes out when the right combination of circumstances, or just worse scrolling happens. But yeah, I do think people underestimate them just because the models themselves feel like they're going to be the anvil wall waiting for you.
Exactly. And yeah, if they get charged and everything is coordinated correctly as well, like they're very hard to lift, although they definitely do not attack as well if they haven't charged, right? So essentially these armies become like this kind of this like weird swamp castle of just like, at least the way I've been playing them, of just like bizarre units that all have access to 5 wards that are standing in the way, and everybody is trying to enable me to be able to charge with one of those hammer blocks, right? Because if one of those hammer blocks charges, chances are they do enough violence to get me over the line to the second half of the game, right?
That makes sense. You're basically like slowly baiting people into positions where their key piece gets eradicated, and then they still have to deal with 20 hammers.
There are so many, like the city's list is full of so many just bad options for the opponent, because like either you're fighting command core or you're stuck in combat with 5 wound heroes that are 5 up warded, or chaos and toll are behind you, or there's a shooting unit that you just can't quite get to without exposing yourself or something. That just all those pieces together become sort of like an unsolvable puzzle, hopefully for your opponent. So while they feel like they should be winning because they're just killing stuff left, right, and center, like it just can't do it quick enough, right? And so the game plan usually revolves around like direct violence to exactly the thing that's going to lift me quickly so that I don't die immediately, and then just like scatter to try to like outscore no matter what happens in the second half of the game.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I got to ask, because I'm sure a lot of people who have dabbled with cities or looked at the scrolls are probably thinking the same thing. That makes sense with the hammers, but what about the more obvious choice? What about the executioners? I mean, do you think about those as a killy unit within cities? 20 of them can put out 60 attacks with the order with an automatic +1, and they're going to do mortals on a 5+, that's Severing Strike. They seem like the delivery, don't have to worry about positioning alternative. So why not? Or why them?
And also 25 millimeters. So, you're getting the whole unit in within 3 inches to whack somebody.
Yes. Here's, I think, why. And I don't think anybody's wrong for taking executioners, although you maybe don't need them now. Like they're getting kind of all of the non-humans are becoming expensive in a way that it's getting the budget's getting very tight on bringing them. And you will be able to bring twice as much of a worse version of something else that's a human, which is probably more valuable at this point. But
very fair.
Humans, man.
Executioners were more consistent to get all that to go because you didn't have to all attack them. So the combo is when executioners have crit mortals, but they do 1 damage. When they charge, they crit on 5s. They're 2 attacks each base, but on the charge in cities, you can get +1 attacks. So you end up with 61 attacks, critting on 5s, crit mortals, 1 damage. So that's 20 mortal wounds on the dice almost every time, and then a handful of friend 1 saves after, which is just like it's gross. It's just like a lot. Like it was very powerful. The unit of executioners was just devastating to them. But the problem is if you run that unit into Blight Kings, for instance, anything with a 3-up, 5-up, 20 mortal wounds and 6 saves at Ren 1 don't cut it, right? You don't kill that. And then being a 4-up save with no standing ward meant that executioner unit probably 8 more points lost than they dealt on that occasion. So sometimes they were very valuable because they would do enough damage to compensate for that and be fine. But the damage cap that they had to deliver they never quite, for me, over time, got over the line to compensate for the fact that they would die as soon as they went in, right? You set your missile and they would do sometimes enough damage and then would not make it home. And the other problems is if there was ever any shooting, if there was any shooting, those executioners had to be in the woods because they were just going to drop dead. And the other problem was if your opponent got to your executioners, and games just get complicated, you can't always compensate for this. They either got eradicated very quickly because they were not as wound dense as or not as defense dense as other options could be, or they without charging, they do almost nothing in combat, right? So they become their worst graveguard, pretty much.
Weird, tar-pitted, should be doing better versions of themselves. Yeah.
Now there are tricks to do this. I have now there's just so many ways that I try to figure out ways to get myself to be able to charge again, right? In cities because of the charge dependence of the output usually. And that's bridge and stuff. But even then the executioners just didn't do enough for the whole game, right? Although they did so much damage in one swing before.
That makes sense. They're so fun. The idea of 3d6 charging and getting something makes sense. But everything you've raised, I think is a very good point. And I can see now that some things just laugh at it because their damage cap is just too low with the numbers. If you have a 35 wound Gargant, I'll take 20 mortal wounds, and then you'll do 3 more, and that'll kill everyone.
Even worse, they'll roll 20 dice and deal 9 mortal wounds to your executioners before they swing, right? Because of their rampages and things. And then you only have half the unit alive to do damage, period. And that's even a problem for hammers.
Then there's no gas at all. Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about is cities. Cities is always about trying to figure out how to charge with your right stuff and make sure that charge connects because you don't have access to a lot of strikes first or strikes last. You can't you don't have any of your defensive durability when you're charging. And so you're looking for ways to make that charge count. And executioners, although they really do that, they have if you can't coordinate that moment where they charge, they have very little they can do for you at that point. Versus hammers will refuse to die for a while and sometimes accidentally spike hitting on force with that damage too much.
100%. I mean, they're the unit which can still do what it looks like they're built to do, which is sit there and take the charge.
Yeah. Now, Dylan, I've got a question for you because Jack's been on me. So let's say hypothetically I wanted to run 3 great cannons. Okay.
Well, you're in luck, right? Because they've just added a battle formation that makes them almost good.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So I have I haven't played a cannon in a list of events at all yet, and I have 3 builds here, right? So I'm working on them.
I only have 2, but man, do I actually let Jack convince me to getting a 3rd one? What are we talking about here?
I think if you're bringing 2 cannons, you should probably bring a 3rd. Is what I would say. Or get a steam tank. Is actually
I've never ran 2. I only had the one for a spearhead thing, and then I got another one for a narrative event. But competitively, is it almost time to run 3, or is this just a meme?
I don't know yet. I think one thing is you got to be very careful about your shooting units because I don't know. There's some rumblings about changes to terrain in such a way that mitigates shooting. And I don't really know what that looks like. It just makes me very worried for any list that requires shooting going forward.
But yeah, talk about the state of city shooting, because for a while, I mean, again, through second, before you said you were playing, it was you bridge 20 Thunderers or 30 Thunder, the full reinforced thing. We had all kinds of mortal wound shooting back in the day. Now, what are we looking at here? Are we bringing a bunch of dark shards for volume? Are we bringing Fusiliers en masse? Do we have the Ogre Warhulk and the Sniper? Like, what are we talking?
So I think there's two answers. The historical one was that cities, I would describe it as an army that can shoot, but not a shooting army, at least pre-Scourge Garan. Meaning that like people, so for instance, you had a lot of good shooting options, right? Fusiliers and Dark Shards can shoot a very long way, and they can shoot very hard. But it's enabled by the fact that you have a command enhancement that allows you to get +1 to wound. If you don't get that +1 to wound, the units don't do nearly as much as you were expecting them to. And again, this is like one of those things is like you have opportunity cost of how to set up your little castle, right? And if you have that shooting unit, like you need it to fire or else you're missing out on a lot of output. But shooting output is very nice because you don't have to engage to make it happen, and it happens before units go into combat, so you can get flexibility and reassess the circumstance based on this. So you used to
projection hypothetically.
You used to bring a shooting block, but only one, right? And I would often like finish games with people. My choice in the end was Dark Shards because they could move and fire was much more valuable than the Fusiliers, which were unkillable.
100%.
They couldn't move, so I couldn't always get them to where I wanted them to fire. And they did more damage if it all worked out. There was wild, so what they could do. But essentially, like people would get shot by the Dark Shards and take 35 saves and then lose like 20 hit points, and they would ask me like, why don't you just take 4 units of these? And it's pretty much just like, well, I can't. The economies of scale and city shooting are really dependent on that enhancement. And so if you have a second unit of one of these shooting things, you don't get very much, they don't become as efficient as the unit that you were expecting it to do. There was a world where you could bring Fusiliers and have them be like a accidental chip damage shooting screen, which was bad. I didn't mind that either. But like if you're thinking about it as a shooting army, it really only has one shooting unit in any given list. This is how it was before. Now with the change to all-out defense, I actually think that makes the difference on this, right? The fact that armies with 3-up saves can only all-out defend against one of your shooting units means that you can get considerable or consistent output out of multiple units of Fusiliers or Dark Shards as they're firing one unit you really need dead because they can only all defend one of those target uses.
So for city shooting, spicy outside take from a non-cities player, but what better time to throw this out there?
Yeah,
because I did open a box in my house recently and discovered 120 Corsairs all assembled from Dark Elf days.
Lord, I used to love those so much, man. They were
so
120.
Fun.
That's 80 Bestigor over there for
and
Matt.
It would be so memey, but I could easily field 5 blocks of 20. I mean, 240 for 20.
Wider corpse fighters, but okay.
And each one of them can dump 40 shots. Crappy shots,
right?
But they also they're like speed bumps. You kill them, they reflect some damage and fight.
I haven't played Corsairs yet, but now I'm sitting here thinking I could do 3 of them. You could bring Talia, and with a +1 to your if you coordinate her +1 to wound buff on them, turn you want to go in. You got a lot of shooting followed up by a lot of little volume attack. It's not bad.
Yeah. And they strike you back. You just roll 6s on all their attacks, and then you reflect mortal wounds.
Yeah, no problem. No issue. They're like Wrath Mongers, exactly the same. Nothing else will. Please try it. You know how it goes. Let's put it that way.
We have to have a TTS game with this.
And if it goes well, I'll buy those. How about that?
I'm stretching the edges of meme territory with some of my current lists, so I'll fund it.
Yeah, the cities. So cities, I would describe as an army that shoots but is not a shooting army. Like there's just, or at least I don't know if that's true now, but before it was like I couldn't find ways to make like a mass shooting works in the way that Slanesh could, or even KO with a lot of thunders or something. You just couldn't get the pieces to all be able to do what they needed to, right? So it's like with the Rattling guns too. They had there's weird contextual problems where people were really worried about just spamming Rattling guns and being unstoppable output. But the fact that they're 15-inch range and can be tagged in combat meant that they were way harder to deliver than people expected them to be. And so it was like in context, just very difficult problem. So you couldn't spam
that's fair.
the units, and then you found the right moment to use them, and then you had other options. So the shooting for cities earlier, if you're bringing shooting, it's largely to bring the game to you. So all those factors you need to line up, like charging with the buff up, with only within 12, with a ward save up as well. All those factors could happen if they had to come to you because there was shooting pressure up.
Almost like you can't just ignore my castle kind of like.
Yeah, that was the hardest. The hardest thing to do as a cities player is deal with an opponent who's refusing to engage with you, because you have to. You're like, all your shoelaces are tied together on all your units to like keep the heroes in range for the wards, for the buffs, for the like whatever. Like I can't charge you if that charge ends outside of 12 inches of a unit, because I'll just lose. I'll lose my whole army like battle trait if I'm outside 12 of a hero. Like I have no +1 attacks. I have no ward save on the next turn. So if the opponents just stood back and waited and made it hard for me to coordinate that was the hardest games, right? Like eventually I would have to make a mistake, essentially. Like I'd be forced out of position. Versus if you're shooting, you're hoping that that's going to clear their scoring pieces so that they have to come to you. And then the hammers are waiting 5 inches behind to just like end the game. That's fingers crossed. That's the plan at least.
So this is really excellent stuff, Dylan. I think everyone who's thinking cities, maybe cities for me would kind of pick up on a lot of these things.
You warned it has a 42% win rate.
And you're a big chunk of that win rate yourself.
Yeah,
holding that faction up.
It's great.
You and Jeremy, right? I mean, I guess maybe that's another fun question. I know Jeremy, like, you won LVO this year, right? Was that correct? I guess now you can. Yeah. Does he have a different style than you? Would you say you guys kind of lockstep?
Rip the Phoenician, man. That's all I think of with him and his assassins back in the day.
Oh yeah, he's been playing this army for much longer than I have, and has experienced all of the versions of its identity that I just like. I've only heard stories about, so it's hard to even guess what he's thinking about. Like any given list. Now that said, like there was a moment around LVO we had similar builds, like a shooting block with a cavalry block with some hammers and things like that.
Yeah.
And then we've like our final before Scourge of Garan have diverged in a way that were different. So for Jeremy, like the hammers became an important factor for me in lists that I could not like play without. Essentially, like I was learning, or not. I didn't want to. It felt like such a valuable game plan to use the hammers as just like
it is. That's not even a crutch. That is what you need to do to win.
Exactly. It was just like, here's my damage, right? Because I was focusing on damage.
Yeah.
Jeremy's hammer is the dark shards, right? So I'm setting up the hammers to charge and delete whatever they charge, and Jeremy is spending his whole game making sure that those dark shards shoot every damn turn, right? Always into infantry or whatever they want to, because it's just like efficient. Jeremy's list for Worlds, which again is a team's list, so there could be considerations that don't necessarily apply for GT circumstances, like people that they were trying to put him into.
Yeah.
A unit of Dark Shards, 3 units of Command Corps, Palace and Toll, Galen and Duralia. So a lot of hero support to make sure orders are going up, and an auto field sergeant essentially on your general's reg.
Yeah.
I think he did something differently actually. And then a unit of Drakespawn Knights, which were Drakespawn Knights are a not as flashy cavalry as others are used to, and not as flashy as the hammers, but are a really, really efficient mix of speed, durability, and damage. Because
it went down in points after a while too.
I think it went up actually. Yeah, they were.
Oh, now it's up. My God, now it's 190 again.
Yeah, they're once.
Jesus.
Yeah, so I think that
what are you guys doing to these units that you?
Okay, so the win rate's at 42% now, but that's much lower than it was 3 months ago before the battle scroll. What happened essentially is I think that there were a handful of players like myself and Jeremy who caught on to some of the really, really powerful tools in the book, and the win rate amongst us was very, very high, as opposed to people that were bringing launch boxes and old models, to their RTTs, just because they had those things for a long time. And I like that's totally
that's fair.
A wonderful and valid way to take this army, but it's also not the optimized way usually.
No.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense given sort of the almost too many options, or like, what is in my grab bag?
There was kind of a funny moment at the last battle scroll where there was just like out of left field this haymaker of point increases on exactly the units that were being leveraged for this, right? So all of the heroes that we were using to bring the dwarves and the elves went up in points. And in addition, Dark Shards, Dark Riders, Drakespawn Knights, Hammers, and Executioners all went up to like at least 150 or 160 apiece. And it just was reaching a point where it's like, ooh, these are premium units now to bring. Because I think they have some kind of data where they can break down, like, when this unit is included in the list, what's its win rate? And so those units had big red flags on them. And I think that, if I'm being very cynical about it, they want to sell, or they want the army to be built out of the free guild models, right? And obstinately, we're not using them as the core of the army for a long time, right?
There's got to be some truth to that. They're a model making company of the day.
I totally understand it, right? And I like, it's a shame for anybody who really likes their old world models. That's why I've made conversions of them to stand in for hammers and whatever that can pivot over slums and such. But like,
which you would think would be the lore that they're supposed to be so cosmopolitan that you would have mixed race units.
Well, but exactly. I think
which would be a cool thing, but
I don't think the army needs to have like a million different keywords for war calls and whatever, but it would be fun if your command corps like had options for different, like, different realms to be represented, because the cities are literally multi-racial, I suppose.
Yeah.
That would be, I think
that is the point.
I think that's on the agenda probably coming up, but that battle scroll seemed to target specifically the units that I've outlined here, but weirdly command corps went down in points or something like that, right? So there's sort of a clear trend on where this is going, and it's not in the direction of the hammers anymore, right? So it's goofy. But Jeremy plays the Drakespawn and the shooting and the wall of command corps as well. So it's working, I think, somewhat similarly, backcapping with Callus and Toll, using the like wound dense and difficult to get through units of the command corps and the Drakespawn in order to enable your like one damage piece, which in his case is Drakespawn, and from me is hammerers, in order to try to do enough damage to hold you through the game. Because once you connect, you have a tendency to sort of lose, but lose slower than your opponent needs you to, and you just need to manage scoring out to make sure that you get through that situation.
No, that's fair, Dylan. So we've talked about some of your favorite units. What are some of your least favorite? What do you feel like has some room to improve here?
Least favorite units. What do I never like to bring? I don't know if I would have a least favorite unit. It almost feels cruel to some.
Least played.
Blackheart Corsairs, for instance. Sorry.
Okay. The Charybdis for me, definitely. I love it as the meme, but it was the monsters for it. It's like, I could just bring other stuff.
Yeah, there's just a pile of stuff in that book that you would just like never consider bringing, and it's just like it's a bummer. Bleak Swords I've never played for a long time. Still
really?
Bleak Swords can be cool now. I think there's a world where you could use them, but Steel Helms were really of very little use for a long time too. Just
wow.
Well,
you're not going human centric, so you don't care about they consecrate the objective for the ward.
It was difficult to manage because you had to hold it. You had to hold the objective before the movement phase started. And have no opponents on it or no models on it whatsoever. And even then it was a 3-up save. And then in order to benefit from the ward, every single model has to be contesting the objective. So that's like 3 hoops to jump through when you can just say that unit's fighting last, they have a 5-up ward. Like, we don't need ward or like ward sources.
No, that's fair.
It could be good if it worked, but it wasn't a reason to bring them when they could be taking up a regiment slot or another foot hero, right? Like, that was valuable things.
Sure. So we keep talking about all these foot heroes here. And yes, we know that the Rune Lord is great. For the Prayer Lord, we've got the Sorcerers to go and work with all the different Dark Elves. But what's your favorite foot hero? Are you more of the Witch Hunter side and you're going Dorelia and her dad, or are you going...
The Freeguild Marshal, I think, is a wonderful pick. I think he doesn't have anything on him scroll that's like +1 rend or anything, but there are so many times when he's standing in the woods and I have some units on 2 objectives wholly within 12 of him, and he's just buffing their control value to a place that like undoes somebody's tactic or like takes the objective with only 1 or 2 models on there, which is really nice.
Yeah.
We've talked about some of the issues with coordinating units. He's got that ability to give a human the ability to, like a human unit, to ignore the range restriction on receiving orders from anywhere on the board. So send Cavaliers really deep and still give them the ward save every turn and pain with them, for instance. So it was like he ended up, it enables the command corps to have their standing. So it ended up being like, I think most, I don't know if I'd leave without a foot marshal at this point. Like,
Too
that's
fun.
a weird pick one,
Not
that weird, to be honest, but
no, that makes sense.
Being reinvented with all this good stuff.
So for the future you see for cities here, I know because we're getting slow drips and drabs for the next General's Handbook that'll be out sooner than later. What's going on here? What you got some gears turning, that hamster in the wheel running around?
What is the situation? So I think there were two problems that cities had that are like addressed somewhat by the index changes. Maybe three actually. The first issue is that humans can't hurt anything, right? They have no rends and they wound on force. So
it's so horrible. Yeah.
With a human. The second one is you do no damage once you're stuck in combat because you no longer charge and you no longer counter charge, so you can't get +1 attacks. The units are balanced around the fact that their cap damage can't be so much that they end the whole game if they charge. But that also means that when they haven't charged, they do not do as much damage as other units do. And then the last one is like they just were missing an unstick factor, let's say. Like
I like that.
Missing a way to commit and get home or commit and not lose the resources that you put out there, right? So the Scourge of Grand rules essentially just redid the map on all three of those problems, right?
Walk me through them.
Yeah, it's cool. We got two battle formations. One of them lets the cannons, it lets you reroll like one dice in the attack sequence for 3 different cannons in your army. Cute, and makes the cannons very much more reliable than they used to be. But the one that really gets me excited is the other option, which is Fearless Exemplars, it's called. And essentially, it's in your hero phase. You pick a foot hero that's a human, and then wholly within 12 of him, you pick a war machine and a infantry unit. The infantry unit gets +1 rend, and the war machine gets +1 rend in shooting. So suddenly, when we think about it, like that suddenly makes a lot of the infantry humans, like, they look a little different when they have rend 1 on their war screen.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, especially when we start to talk about some of the other pieces that fall into place on top of it. Because there's 2 new enhancements that are very interesting to add together with that. Because one of them is called like Cosmopolitan Hero or Leader or something. Essentially, when your character does like use an ability on a 3-up, they give 3 human units +1 to wound until your next hero phase, wherever they go. So that's Cavaliers, that's Steel Helms, that's Fusiliers, that's Command Corps, just any humans in combat.
It's so funny, by the way, just looking at the Cosmopolitan Leader ability. There's such a clear human bias here because it's +1 to wound for human.
So much.
And you only pick 3 units if it's a human hero. Like it's just true that like the old world models are being phased out. They were like, we made the points so low on humans, you're still not playing them. Here's our final argument. Go. Yeah. And honestly, it does convince me. It's great. The enhancements on top of that, they increase the output of human units by a lot. Either a Cosmopolitan Hero or Leader, which like +1 to wound is a huge deal. The only problem is that it goes off on a 3-up, so maybe it doesn't always happen.
You're introducing the randomness. You're back to the randomness of all the other armies.
About this because I have 2 build paths I have right now. One of them is like 3 different random rolls that I don't know how I feel about anymore. All right, the other one's called Draw Steel, and it's just like the hero who has it charges, and then he can give a unit that's wholly within 12 of him +1 more attacks as well. So that's like it's exactly the same as the charge order, except so now you can give it again. So any unit in humans, it can also be +2 attacks per model. So when you put those things together on something like Steel Helms, before this book, it was 20 Steel Helms would attack 40 times, 4s and 4s, no rend 1 damage. So which means no damage at all. Like that's nothing. That's 10 seconds. You can't ask them to do anything. Now that number will be, if they charge 80 attacks on 3s, on possibly 3s, like rend 1 and 1 damage. And that is a lot for 180 points. Like that is a lot of damage out of them. You kind of have to pick and choose, right? Are you going to be +1 to wound, or are you going to be +1 attacks because you have to choose which enhancement you're taking? Talia can give you a once per game +1 to wound as well if you're interested. But essentially, like when you look at units like Steel Helms or Flagellants or even the Command Corps now, you can ask them to do real damage to targets as long as they're able to charge, right? And my favorite combo actually is with Fusiliers, because there's no reason that Fusiliers can't be your melee hammer at this point as well, because they also are 20 models with +2 attacks with an additional rends now, right? So gas it all up. They shoot
fix bayonets and go in.
You got the Ogre Warhulk, who's a Vigiler. He fires at the target, +1 to hit. The Fusiliers fire 40 times, 3 attacks, or 3s to hit, 4s to wound, rend 1, 1 damage. They charge, you don't fix bayonets, you charge. and then they attack 60 times. So
Yeah.
240 point unit is 100 attacks, 3s, 4s, rend 1/1. And in context of the all defense change, like I don't know, like your opponent's probably not all out defending against that particular attack if Cavaliers were also going in, or if they do that, they're not defending something else. Suddenly that rend 1 is super valuable and is giving you options that you didn't have before. So you don't necessarily need executioners or hammerers because you have ways to do damage in the combat, right? There are ways to soup humans up to make them like true danger. It's very fun.
Bayonets over the top of the trench kind of idea.
It's unbelievable. My favorite combo right now is on the first turn of the. We'll talk about why this works through Zenestra. But at the first turn of the game, pass the Soul Scream Bridge, send your Fusiliers through, drop them 3 inches. Or they're 9 inches from the opponent. They slide 3.
Move them 3. Yeah.
They fortify. They all fire at something. They charge and they do their 60 attacks with their draw steel hero, and then they just come home, right? Because Zenestra is the last piece, which is the way to manipulate combat. Like,
is they come back when
your salvation.
Oh my god!
So essentially, like, what people are really worried about with the Zenestra scroll is that D6 damage to keep wizards within 18 inches, which is gross, right? Like that, I understand that worry, but her prayer with the reverse translocate is just shocking. Like, it's unbelievable what you can do with this.
The yo-yoing capacity of that is insane.
so you like, this is what your city's turns look like.
And they're shooting units. You don't care that they can't charge afterwards. You just set them up again to be able to shoot. It's
fire. Like, it's just unbelievable the options you get out of this thing.
It really is funny because it's like the old Sylvaneth builds.
Yeah. You're just strike and fade, but way more consistent and with 3 units, right? Like, so cities' turns look like this. Like, you have 3 teleport slots in your head that you can use in your opponent's hero phase. For exact ruling, Zenestra allows on her prayer on a 4-up to pick 3 human units anywhere on the battlefield, remove them, and set them up wholly within 12 of Zenestra. And the only stipulation is that they are not in combat when they land, and then they can't charge on that turn.
I didn't realize she actually lets you reroll ones on her prayer roll. Now.
Is like, this would be kind of a sketchy game plan. If you roll a 1 on the dice, you failed the prayer. But because she rerolls 1s, it's 35 out of 36 times this goes off, right? Like, as long as you at least 1, like 2 prayer points, you it's the same as miscasting, essentially. Like,
so
you shouldn't have, you probably will eventually, but like, you are safe to do this plan. Because you pick up 3 units, you put them wholly within 12 as an extra, and they're just ready to go. So this is what the turn looks like, is like Talia goes out, 2 units of 10 Cavaliers go out, they go and they hit targets. They don't do that much damage because they're still like rend 1, whatever. But
sure.
A lot. Like, it's a melee hammer. And then your opponent's turn comes and they call something, like, they don't realize what's about to happen. They call Do Not Waver or like Slay the Entourage on Talia, and then you interrupt chant with Zenestra. And 35 out of 36 times, you pick up all 3 of those units that you sent in and you put them behind your castle. And now there are Anchor standing in the way with a line of Fusiliers waiting to fire and charge on the next turn. And then 20 Cavaliers and Talia standing behind Zenestra, ready to do it again every single turn. So suddenly you have like 2 precepts going on here, right? You're like a hyper, like punchy, like lightly punchy, like recall army. And then you also can make the humans do damage, right? So you have 2 new features you're looking at. How am I going to leverage Zenestra's teleporting each turn, and then how do I plan to do that? And then what's my flavor of human damage I'm interested in bringing? Because you could either be trying to make your Cavaliers do damage or focus on infantry units that are going to be counterpunching and things like that. And it seems very powerful on paper, and then in context of the fact that the human units have been dropping in points precipitously for like a year, like, it's just crazy how many even wounds you can field with this at this point. Because like, the lists are running close to 160, and that's just
easily
just wild, right? It's
the density of that is impressive.
It's great. So that's where we're at, right? It's like, you don't need. It's much easier to coordinate. It's much less risky to coordinate aggressive actions with cities now, because Zenestra lets you come home no matter what. Right? Just pull back, like units come back. If things go wrong when you get doubled, Zenestra picks up those shooting units and moves them into shooting position. And then the things that are still alive can fire. If you just like really need to stop a tactic or cancel or get behind your opponent, even if Zenestra charges, interrupt chance, and like throws Command Corps over the line to back cap points on your opponent's turn, like there's just so many plays that come out of what she can do that is your opponent can't interact with without killing her. and just like totally warps like how much this army can move around, which is it's just really cool to watch at this point. So yeah, it's all exploring, right? Like, do I want flagellants to be my damage piece because when they get hit, they die and deal 4 mortals because Sinestro's in the book? Do I just want Fusiliers because they are not as much melee damage as Steel Helms, but they work, right? And they're really cheap. Am I going for wounding on freeze Cavaliers all down the line, like to just be av charges go in? Like, it's hard to say what that mix is, but it's suddenly like the army is no longer it's no longer like that difficult to be aggressive and proactive against your opponent because you have a way to just like reset the clock if things go wrong that you did not before. And and so with the alt defense change too, like the random shooting from Fusiliers with the Ogre Warhulk is not inconsequential, right? Like the first volley might get all out defensed, but if you have a second unit, which there's no reason you might not, it will not be all out defense, and so it will do, like 9 damage or something like that before the charging happens. So suddenly it's like multi-phase damage, lots of ways to get into combat. Always another option for melee because like anything can take these kinds of things.
And I have a quick question for you, Dylan.
Yeah. Yes.
To follow up on this too, how are you feeling about the Cavalier change?
I think both are good. That was the other, I guess I skipped over them. The other War Scroll change was Cavaliers have a chance to count as having charged in combat now, right? So
you touched briefly, but we didn't compare.
So the old Cavaliers were 3 attacks each, 4 is 4, run 1, 2 damage on the charge. Fine if you committed to it. The new Cavaliers hit on freeze base, which is really, really nice, and but only have 2 attacks. So I think the math on that is like slightly in favor of the more attacks, but not in a meaningful, like it's like 1 point of damage difference.
Yeah.
And the thing that changed with them is that if you're not doing the Sinestra cycle charge, if your Cavaliers are stuck in combat as a charge phase ability, they can attempt to I love the name of this ability. It's called the Red Work. They can essentially try to like recapture the momentum of a charge by rolling a dice, and on like a 4-up or a 3-up, they can count as having charged for the subsequent combat phase, which is really cool because it means that like we said, cities off the charge is not dangerous, but now they can be on the charging when you're in combat. So it's an interesting option. And then there's a really, really fun piece of tech with it because when that Cavalier unit uses that ability, if there is a Cavalier Marshal in range of them, they can target that Cavalier Marshal to also receive the charge status as well as the Cavaliers. The Marshal has a almost never used once per game when this unit has charged, give itself and a Cavalier unit wholly within 12 strikes first. Meaning that there's like a pseudo Bellacore trigger sitting there if you want to commit to it. Because you can put your Cavaliers on the line up front, your opponent charges them, you can roll a dice on a 4 or a 3-up. I think there's some conditionality about it. And if there's a Cav Marshal in combat range of them, you can give the Cav Marshal charged, give the Cavaliers quote unquote charged, and call yourself to have strikes first before your opponent goes. And then, I mean, if you want to go all in on this, you can give +2 attacks from draw, steal, and the order engage the foe because you charged that turn. Meaning that
does sound pretty fun.
You have a 10 model, if it all goes off right, you have a 10 model Cavalier unit with 40 attacks that are 3s, rend 1, damage 2, striking first before your opponent goes. So again, another way to manipulate combat activations that did not occur before.
That's a lot of fun because we were going back and forth on it a bit, as to which of the versions was better, and people have different opinions. I thought the thing that was kind of spicy with them that I liked the sound of was using the Red Work in your opponent's turn to then power through your opponent's turn and just be wherever the heck you want to be.
Yeah, and then just slide away. Absolutely right that is available. That's really there. Another way that cities sneaks out a weird position that you weren't expecting. It's really good. That's a great little way to use it. It's a little bit like we were saying. It's a little bit dice roll dependent, right?
4-up.
Set up all of strikes first or whatever, and I got to roll a 4-up to make it work. Granted, if you don't get it off, you still get to just put a 5-up board on the unit anyway, so it doesn't matter. That's it can maybe live, but I was finding that I had lists that were trying to rely on that little technique, towards the back of the game, and it just wasn't lining up right. I would still take too much damage essentially.
That uncertainty is too stressful.
Yeah.
So it comes down, it's just like in practice, like it comes down to if you have like one Cavalier unit and no Cav Marshal, you take the old Cavaliers because they technically do slightly more damage, especially with the impact mortals. If you do have a Cav Marshal or you have multiple units of Cavaliers such that it's very difficult to keep them all on the charge every turn, you can't like give one unit all the buffs. The other Cavaliers are slightly more consistent because they can always hit on 3s and they have that chance to be more useful on the off turn if they get charged. That's usually
that's real fun. That's something to keep in mind, in our future Geranite exploits once we're finally into whatever kind of environment this new GHB is going to be.
It's just like it's impossible to like. You imagine all these cool combos, and you're just like, and all of this might be useful because like will do nothing for my scoring, right? Like I have to do some other thing that I never could have predicted right now in order to win the game, and I have to. None of this matters for that. Yeah,
exactly. The all forests realm is coming.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a pretty good journey. I think really fun to see some of these things, and hear from you, Dylan, like how to bring all this to life. So I think if people haven't been jazzed about cities before, probably listening to this episode, hopefully they will be.
I hope so. I feel like it's so many things so many pieces of advice to try to give, and it's so hard to like organize. There's and the army is complicated to play with all the moving pieces. That my best advice would probably just be like keep playing and make note of when it got hard, because that's what you need to like figure out how to manage. Is like why did this get difficult at this time? When that kind of thing. Hard to
That's fun.
Sorry.
We'll have to consider maybe at some point doing like how it went like out of the woods or into the woods kind of like reprise on what it's been like once we're deep into GHB.
Yeah. I'd be interested in thinking about that too. I think I'm adding Stormcast to my roster as well. I think painting up for Clusians, I think that's my direction here. So
really?
New Iridan is a
is a nice,
I like the Iridan change. They are much more powerful than new. They're much more usable than they were. And I like to see that too.
It's so cool. All of these drops are just tempting me in different directions. I'm staying true to my Slaves to Darkness for now, but I keep looking across the aisle at all the different things.
Yeah. Look good. Any other final closing thoughts on cities there, Dylan?
Or anything else for that matter?
I don't know.
Or anything else.
I feel like I want another game with you, Jack. Like I think we're due for one as well. And I should get my ass on your TTS league next time you guys launch it. That would be fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. Looking forward to that. We'll do one after we launch the new editions, and people can try out all the new toys. And
that'll be fun.
Another RTT style, so it'll be some good time.
Yeah, we need more events at TJ's, Jack. You're not.
My prophesied return is coming with the 6-month-old slowly graduating to
right.
Baby. I know. He has a really good reason. I'll be honest.
But joking aside, I am going to have those. They're going to be coming back in a big way. We already talked to Tom. We just have to get them going. Those are always a lot of fun.
There's so much room, right? And it's really nice that the cafe is in the building, because even though the food is like perfectly fine, let's say charitably, like everybody eats together, which is a huge deal, honestly, at the events.
Yeah. And you get your iced coffee, whatever, it'll go anywhere. And you have room to breathe.
Yeah, it's just a nice thing. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
We'll make it happen. So live and advertise for 2 days.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dylan. This has been
thank you, man.
Thanks everyone out there for listening. If you have any thoughts, the role, like, subscribe, comment. If
we've
you
got
want
a Patreon, we have merch. I'm wearing the shorts right now. They're very comfortable.
Magical, comfortable, dice roll changing, potential life changing. So do all the
especially
things, guys.
With comboed with the jersey and the hat.
All the things.
See them out there. They're in the world. I've played against people and always
real
merch. It's real.
That's very gratifying to hear.
It's hard to ignore. It definitely makes a statement. I like it.
Yeah.
Stylish.
I do like the stripes on her shorts.
Yeah.
Stripes on the shorts. I don't think he was wearing shorts.
No, I legitimately am wearing.
We actually got to see it. Oh my
shorts.
God. Yeah. It's blurry.
A little fuzzy, but you want to see them in focus, go buy a pair yourself.
This is exactly what we were talking about earlier in the episode.
Camera at my crotch for you. This ain't that kind of show.
Very generous. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I guess the real question is, who's going to get the last word?
Oh, if Matt doesn't cut it off at the crotch joke I just made, I don't know what we're doing here, people.
He will sigh. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah.
What do I get if I speak last?
Hello, everybody. It is Rocco, your boy, coming at you once again with another Always Strikes Last promo. That's right. Ring that bell. Leave a like, a subscribe. on whatever platform you're listening to us on, be it YouTube, be it Podbean, whatever you got these days, so you can keep up to date. Don't forget, we have the Patreon, if you want to, give us a thank you for all the stuff we put out. That gets you into our member-exclusive Discord. And if you want to be an even bigger supporter, we've got a merch store.